We're halfway through the week. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Jaein in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. North Korea fires another ballistic missile today, and there are growing calls for the South Korean government to take stronger countermeasures to prevent further provocations. Korea's secondary bourse, the KOSDAQ, surpassed the 800 level during intraday trading last Friday, and eyes are now on how far this rally will go and how long it will last. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. North Korea has fired another missile, which has been classified as an ICBM by the U.S. and the South Korean military. The missile reached an altitude of 4,500 kilometers before landing in the East Sea within Japan's exclusive economic zone. The latest missile flew longer and higher than anything fired by North Korea to date, with the entire continental United States now possibly within range. And for more on this, our Oh Jung-hee joins us from the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. So Jung-hee, what do you have for us?
Jiun, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff have confirmed that North Korea fired a long-range ballistic missile at 3:17 in the morning from Pyeongseong, a city located 30 kilometers north of the capital, Pyongyang. The missile flew 960 kilometers eastward for about 50 minutes and landed in the waters west of Japan. It reached an altitude of 4,500 kilometers, higher than any missile previously launched by North Korea. The North announced this afternoon that the missile it fired today is a newly developed Hwasong-15 class ICBM. The missile was fired at a lofted angle, and experts say it would have a range of over 13,000 kilometers, meaning it could technically reach anywhere in the United States, including Washington, D.C. and New York. The JCS says the recent launch could be seen as a show of defiance against recent economic sanctions on the regime, as well as Washington designating the North as a state sponsor of terrorism.
All right, then. Now walk us through the South Korean military's response.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff said the South Korean and U.S. military detected a missile at 3:18 this morning, just 1 minute after it was fired. South Korean forces conducted precision strike drills near the northern limit line in the East Sea just 6 minutes after the North Korean launch was detected. The JCS says it involved an Army missile unit, a Navy warship, and an Air Force KF-16 fighter jets, each firing at a simulated target, with the distance calibrated to match that of the location where North Korea test-fired its missile.
The South Korean military is keeping close tabs on North Korea's military activities. Our military could destroy the origin of the provocation and nuclear facilities with precision on any given day from the ground, sea, or air.
And with that, I'll be back with more updates for a later newscast. This has been Oh Jung-hee for Business Daily.
And Presidents Moon Jaein and Donald Trump held a conference call following North Korea's missile test, where the two leaders strongly condemned the rogue regime. This 20-minute call is the first of its kind in 73 days and the sixth since President Moon came into office. Both leaders acknowledged that North Korea's provocations posed a grave threat to the entire world and agreed to discuss more specific countermeasures. While military options were reportedly not discussed, Moon emphasized that any armed provocations from Pyongyang will be met with even stronger retaliations. South Korea's political parties were also quick to condemn North Korea's missile launch. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea said any action deemed a threat to the Korean peninsula is unacceptable, adding that Pyongyang will face stronger sanctions if it continues with its provocations. The ruling party also called on the government to do all it can to deal with the situation, along with the international community. The main opposition Liberty Korea party also slammed the North's missile test, saying it shows the regime will not change. It added the latest provocation makes it clear that the Moon Jaein administration's hope for dialogue is just a, quote, fantasy. The Conservative Party called on the government to not simply join, but lead the international community in imposing sanctions on North Korea. The minor opposition People's Party said Pyongyang's continued missile and nuclear tests will drive the regime down the path of self-destruction. It urged the government to take stronger countermeasures so that the North has no choice but to come to the negotiating table. Let's now get a check on how the markets fared here in Seoul today with our Eunice Kim standing by on the line for us. So Eunice, how did investors react to the North Korean missile test?
June, it was a pretty big announcement out of Pyongyang today. The newly minted Hwasong-15 missile claimed to, quote, complete the goal of North Korea's missile program with its reach of the continental U.S. But domestic equity markets were decidedly muted, if not a bit bullish. Both major bourses kicked off the day slightly up after an afternoon of treading water. The benchmark KOSPI wrapped 0.05% down to close at 2512.9 on net selling by overseas and retail investors. The KOSDAQ partially recovered from yesterday's retreat to end up 1.11% on foreign and institutional buying. The Korean currency did not see wide fluctuations this morning and, in fact, strengthened on the day, 1076.81 to the greenback.
And we're hearing the South Korean government is also closely monitoring the markets for any irregularities.
That's right. Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon held an emergency meeting with regulators and central bank officials this morning in reaction to Pyongyang's first provocative act in 75 days. Minister Kim said he did not expect the missile test to have a big impact on Seoul's financial markets. He did pledge, though, swift and stern measures according to contingency plans should there be unusual signs. Meanwhile, investors kept their eyes on the economy over geopolitical tit-for-tat, specifically the Bank of Korea meeting scheduled for tomorrow, and also OECD's GDP growth upgrade for South Korea from 2.6 to 3.2%. That came late yesterday. BNK Securities said market players had already priced in the North Korea risk somewhat in recent net selling on the junior bourse and were poised to be in buying mode today. The measured reaction from Washington also viewed to have contributed to the overall market calm. This has been Eunice Kim for Business Daily.
The tech-heavy KOSDAQ surpassed a psychologically significant 800 level during intraday trading for the first time in 10 years last week. Now, the rally was fueled by expectations of positive earnings and the government's push to bolster the market. However, there are also concerns of this being a stock bubble, similar to the dot-com bubble in the late 90s and the early 2000s. To tell us more about this, global strategist Daniel Yu from Kiwoom Securities joining us in the studio today. Thank you for being here with us.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's start with the news of North Korea's firing of a ballistic missile today. I mean, how did the KOSPI and the KOSDAQ react to this?
Right. Historically, when there's North Korea issues, the equity risk premium for the Korean market goes up quite rapidly. Therefore, the KOSPI drops significantly. But historically, any type of that kind of corrections doesn't last for long. Every time it corrects, then it creates a buying opportunities. Today, North Korea issue or the missile launch was not even a day effect. The market in general has kind of muted all this because I think the KOSPI and especially KOSPI had corrected at the beginning of the week because of a lot of the other issues. So valuation seems to be very cheap on the strong earnings growth. So therefore, this really did not affect. The North Korea issues are long-lasting issues. If the unification occurs similar to a German case, then the Korean equity market and property market will show a significant rise over the future. But everybody do talk about the cost of the unification. So we don't know how that's going to happen. Some people might say it's a 1% of GDP every year for the next 10 years plus. In any case, today's effect, it's been quite limited.
All right, then going back to last week, the KOSDAQ surpassed the 800 mark during its intraday trading. Now, what's the significance of this?
Well, I think based on our analysis, Korean market, or at least part of the Korean equity market called KOSDAQ, is starting to receive a fair price in international markets. In August, we've been saying that the KOSDAQ will start to do a very strong run because when we looked at 150 KOSDAQ companies, the quarter-on-quarter earnings were growing at 18%, which is a very strong number. And looking into the future, earnings are growing fast as well. So having said that, this is the reason why KOSDAQ were able to rise. On top of this, the beginning of this year, the first half of this year, the KOSPI have risen 26%.
Wow.
So KOSDAQ is kind of following the suit. Now, getting proper price for the Korean equity market is quite meaningful because it increases the wealth effect of the Korean consumers to purchase more, and it allows the GDP growth rate to accelerate. Recently, IMF have said that the Korea GDP growth rate expectations expected to rise even further. At the beginning of the year, they've been forecasting 2.6% growth. Now they're saying 3.2%.
Right.
So all in all, we think that recognition of the fair price for the Korean market is very important.
All right, then, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, there are concerns over this drastic surge in the KOSDAQ, perhaps creating a stock bubble. What are your thoughts on this?
Right. I think up until now, it's not a bubble, I think, because if you look at KOSDAQ's PE multiples, it's about 20 times. If you compare it to other similar growth index, something like US's NASDAQ, Japan's JASDAQ, China's the Shenzhen index. If you look at those indices, they're trading at around 30 to 35 times PE multiples, whereas the KOSDAQ is only 20, so it's a discount. But there are some issues like too many bio stocks. 45% of the market capitalization of KOSDAQ is bio stocks, and you can't really recognize the earnings for this yet. But within KOSDAQ, the remaining 55% of it has very strong earnings. We are currently estimating around 25% earnings growth. If that's the case, then it should not be a bubble. Now, if you compare it to year 2000, at that time, the earnings for the KOSDAQ companies did go up to 17% of overall earnings. And therefore, the index reached like 3,000 plus. But the year after that, the earnings all crashed down. So the importance of right now, the KOSDAQ earnings, whether or not that is sustainable. This year, I think it's very sustainable. Next year, it's going to look okay. But year after that, whether that's going to be correct, will be a good number. So the question mark right now is that earnings can be supported with this fourth industrial revolutions, whether Korea is well prepared for this change.
So all in all this under a belt, what's your outlook on the KOSPI and the KOSDAQ from here on out?
Right. I think the KOSDAQ might need to take some breather at this point because it has reached a fair price. But as for the KOSPI is concerned, the KOSPI is trading at 9 times PE, which is even deeper discount than the KOSDAQ, with the earnings growth of 26% plus, and the price to book of only 1 time. If that's the case, we think that the KOSPI has a room for further growth. In the future, if the payout ratio of the corporate's dividends goes up, if that's the case, then the proper recognition for the fair price will be happening for the KOSPI. So I think the KOSPI will probably reach 3,000 plus in year 2018. And then KOSDAQ will probably follow that.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
The OECD has sharply upgraded Korea's economic growth forecast for this year, backed by improving exports and strong corporate investment. The international body also sees the global economy continuing its stable recovery this year. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The OECD has hiked its 2017 economic growth forecast for Korea. It expects the Korean economy to grow 3.2% this year, far faster than its earlier estimate of 2.6%, backed by improving corporate investment and exports, led by the nation's semiconductor industry. The Korean government and the Bank of Korea both have a growth forecast of 3% for this year, with the International Monetary Fund recently upwardly revising its economic outlook for the country to 3.2%. The OECD also raised its outlook for next year to 3% from 2.8% and predicts this trend will continue into 2019. Despite a slowdown in construction investment, the OECD said Seoul could continue 3% range growth backed by a rebound in global trade and expansionary fiscal policy. Yet it also advised the Moon Jaein administration to structurally reform the labor market in order to raise the nation's overall productivity. Meanwhile, the OECD also said in its latest outlook that the global economy is on course to grow 3.6% this year before reaching 3.7% next year, then ease back to 3.6% in 2019. Kim Yo-sun, Business Daily.
In the backdrop of North Korea's latest missile test, President Moon Jaein greeted the president of Sri Lanka with the utmost respect and honor at the Blue House this morning. Our Hwang Ho-jun has this report.
A guard of honor and military band made up of around 300 soldiers from South Korean forces, a group of school children, and President Moon Jae-in himself greeted Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena, the third state guest for Korea to receive this year. Presidents Moon and Sirisena inspected the honor guards together and exchanged greetings with the invited dignitaries from both countries before entering the Blue House, where a small-scale summit took place. The two leaders shared their thoughts on each other's governmental philosophy, with President Moon commending President Sirisena's pursuit to end authoritarianism, to bring about democracy, and to unify his people after the Civil War. Noting the two share similar values of putting people first, pursuing democracy and human rights, and rooting out corruption, President Moon proposed that Seoul and Colombo closely cooperate in the future. President Sirisena in return gave his best wishes for the upcoming Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And regarding North Korea's missile launch on Wednesday morning, the Sri Lankan president expressed his strong support for South Korea. During the expanded summit meeting, which followed shortly after, Presidents Moon and Sirisena evaluated their countries' 40-year-long bilateral relations and pledged to expand cooperation in various areas. The bolstered partnership will include economic cooperation that will allow South Korean companies to take part in Sri Lanka's infrastructure development projects. To aid Sri Lanka's sustainable economic growth, President Moon even pledged to increase Seoul's financial support to Sri Lanka for 3 years to $500 million from its current $300 million via the Economic Development Cooperation Fund by 2019. Also, both leaders agreed to increase people-to-people and cultural exchanges between the two countries. Such efforts to expand bilateral cooperation were reflected in the inking of key agreements and MOUs. In the evening, a state dinner in honor of the visiting president will be hosted by President Moon. The Blue House emphasized President Sirisena's visit to Korea will establish the foundation for the Korean government's new southern policy, which will broaden Seoul's diplomatic horizon beyond Northeast Asia to Southwest Asia. Hwang Ho-jun, Business Daily.
The Moon Jae-in government unveiled its 5-year housing welfare roadmap on Wednesday. Land Minister Kim Hyun-mi said in a briefing that the plan will supply 1 million public houses to young people, newlyweds, the elderly, and low-income families by 2022. 300,000 rental homes will be set aside for those under the age of 39 who do not own a home, while low-interest loan programs will also be extended. The number of newlyweds eligible for housing support will also be increased, and around 70,000 homes will be made available at around 80% of the market price. The government will also allow elderly people without a stable income to sell their homes and receive the money in the form of a pension while living in public rental homes. The government has decided to provide an additional $61 million to firms that have been affected by the shutdown of the Kaesong Industrial Complex. The Unification Ministry plans to finalize the payments by the end of the year, which will be based on the actual amount of damages incurred. The support measures will cover some 74.2% of the confirmed damages from the shuttering of the joint inter-Korean industrial zone. The latest government aid was announced on November 10th, the first time the state has directly intervened to help the affected companies. Bitcoin has crossed the $10,000 mark for the first time as of Tuesday evening in the U.S., rising over tenfolds in the year to date. But there are growing concerns that a bubble may be forming in the Bitcoin market. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
Bitcoin's value has been skyrocketing recently, finally breaking past the $10,000 per coin mark for the first time on Tuesday in the United States. This is just 2 days after the cryptocurrency passed the $9,000 threshold. Bitcoin's market capitalization now stands at about $168 billion. Korea's cryptocurrency exchange Bithumb reported the passing of the milestone on Monday local time when it was trading at $10,112 per coin. This is nearly a 50% increase compared to the start of the month. On a year-to-date basis, Bitcoin's value has risen more than 800% here in Korea. Since the digital currency's founding in 2009, it has made a name for itself by allowing for anonymous transactions now being accepted by more than 100,000 merchants worldwide. The world's largest futures exchange, CME Group, is planning to launch Bitcoin futures trading in the second week of December, while the Japanese cabinet has also passed a set of bills recognizing the virtual currency as a legal method of payment. While Bitcoin may seem like it's well on its way to being established as a legitimate asset class, there are also no shortage of experts highly critical of the cryptocurrency, calling the surge a bubble. As the cryptocurrency's lack of government backing and regulations has led to volatility, experts add that unless Bitcoin can be used for ordinary transactions, it could end up being just another fad. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more of the day's top business stories, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.